Before we get into this conversation, just a quick note. This episode is for informational and educational purposes only. It's not intended to replace medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you're considering peptides or any kind of medical therapy, it's really important to talk with your physician or qualified healthcare provider who understands your individual needs. Today's conversation is one that's been coming up more and more, both in my own life and in conversations with clients, friends, and people in the wellness space. It's the topic of peptides. You're hearing about them everywhere right now in fat loss, recovery, energy, longevity. There's a lot of curiosity around them, a lot of excitement, and honestly, a lot of confusion. Welcome to the Kathy Covington podcast, where science meets soul and strength finds meaning. I'm Kathy, and I created this podcast as a space for women who want more than just a workout. This is a place for total body health, from cellular science to spiritual alignment, from functional nutrition to emotional resilience. Here we blend real research with real stories, honest conversations about healing, growth, and the messy, beautiful process of becoming fully embodied. You'll hear from experts, practitioners, and women just like you, each with a piece of the puzzle to help you live a stronger, clearer, happier, healthier, and more connected life. So if you're ready to go beyond the surface and into the deep, deep, nourishing work of becoming whole, you're in the right place. Today, I'm here with Luis Villaseñor, speaker, entrepreneur, investor, and co-founder of KetoGains and LMNT, an electrolyte brand, and someone who's been at the forefront of conversations around metabolic health, performance, and how we can actually fuel the body for long-term results. In this episode, we talk about where peptides actually fit, not as a shortcut, but as a tool. We get into fat loss, recovery, and longevity, and also the part that matters just as much, which is how to approach all of this in a safe and responsible way. So if you've been curious about peptides or trying to make sense of all the noise, this episode is for you. Welcome, Luis.
Hey, Kathy. Thank you for having me.
It's really nice to have you here. And I would love to start with you. How did you even get into peptides in the first place?
So, long story short, I've been into fitness for as long as I remember, right? Many of us that are into this space, I guess, and from what I've read and heard and getting to know a lot of people in the space, started basically because of a self-discovery or self-improvement journey. And I come from the background of being the overweight kid at school, right? So I just one day got tired of being the fat kid, decided to start improving on my body and just be like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I know it's a little bit cliche, but I'm a kid from the 80s, so I basically that's what I was exposed to, in difference to today with many TikTok influencers and stuff like that. So basically, when you are in this space and you are really in deep water, you get first tips on many of the new technologies or supplements or anything that basically is new. And just like probably I've been taking creatine since, let's say, probably since the 1995, 90, yeah, probably about that long. And for whatever reason, in the recent years, the last three years, it has had a big renaissance. Like people that haven't heard about it are just hearing it again, or many more aspects than just bodybuilding. The same happens with many other supplements and now with peptides, right? In the case of peptides, I was just looking at the first actual receipt that I have from when I bought them. It was like almost 10 or 12 years ago, but probably 10 years. And that's the first one that I recall that I actually used commercially, which was BPC 157, which is a recovery peptide, right? So again, you start to know people that are very much in the science or that had certain connections to a point and are able to acquire certain things that may be not, I wouldn't say legal to a point, but probably not in the known or very much gray market. So that's the reason why I got into them, because they are very intriguing. They offer very different possibilities. And because I always try to experiment firsthand with my body, what are the new things and how they work before I actually recommend them and see if they actually work. Because probably 8 or 9 out of 10 different things that are new probably have a very small benefit versus the cost or what they promise. There are indeed certain things that are really interesting, right? So one of them are actually peptides. And now, I guess, with the advent of AI, the advancement on the technology of what they can actually do and the studies and self-experimentation has basically gone exponentially to a level which we never thought.
So, for someone who's hearing about peptides for the first time, how do you explain usually like what they're actually doing in the body or what they're actually doing to the body?
Yeah, that's the most common question because people think they are either steroids or that they are supplements or that they are pills. There's a lot of misinformation, especially because it has gotten to a level where basically soccer moms are talking about it, right? So peptides are basically amino acids, chains of amino acids. So as we know, amino acids are to a point part of what proteins are made of, right? And proteins are the building block of our body. So amino acids, in a way, are the smallest piece of a protein. And to put it in a way, they're like Lego blocks. And then these Lego blocks make a set, which are the actual proteins. And then the actual proteins make an organ to a point or organ tissue, right? And depending on how you accommodate them or build them, they can also have different functions. So first of all, peptides are new because people think that they are invented or they are artificial. Many of them are actually natural in the human body and have been known for years. Like the most common that people should know is insulin. Insulin is a peptide, right? And it has been discovered since, I may be wrong on this because it's not my, like I have it on the top of my, in the tip of my tongue, but it should have been discovered in the 1940s or something like that when they first discovered injectable insulin and they used it to treat patients. Somewhere in between, right? But then we also have oxytocin, which a lot of people might have heard about, which is like the bonding hormone that basically mothers segregate when they have a kid, when they give birth. Or also like it's very common, I don't know if you have pets, but if you're in the pet space, you will see that, for example, when a dog bonds to its owner and they have those puppy eyes that they see with like a super love, like they are in love with you, they are segregating oxytocin. So oxytocin is a hormone that basically creates bonding between species or between a parent and a kid or between spouses, right? And also growth hormone is a peptide by itself. So those are probably the most common ones. And what actually peptides do, peptides should be seen as messengers or keys that bind to a receptor in the human body and create a cellular response, right? They tell your body to do something that it normally is programmed to do. You won't really do something that your body cannot do. So to a point, it makes your body do many of the things that it already does, but better, right?
Right, that makes sense. And why do you think they've gotten so popular so quickly right now? I feel like it's in the news everywhere right now, in the middle of
Yeah.
conversations. Like, why now?
Basically, because all the GLPs. That's the reason why. Like I mentioned, I've been using peptides for over 10 years, and it was a very niche topic that only people that were into very deep levels of fitness, like let's say bodybuilders or high-end athletes, people that were the athletes, I mean, in the scope that they were actually going into the Olympics or stuff like that, sort of had heard about because in many cases, most of them, what they do is help with the recovery. So imagine that you're an athlete, like a pro athlete that probably gets into an injury and they tell you, okay, this is going to take you out for 8 or maybe 12 months. But there's this thing that if you use it, probably you'll be back in 2 months. Okay, let's try and take it, right? But they were sort of either kept like a secret because you don't want the other competitors to, have also this advantage, or they were very expensive. So just to again go back to the example of when I used them first, I recall using BPC, which again is a recovery peptide, precisely for that reason to recover from sports injuries. And the smallest vial, which was, I guess, 5 milligrams, costed me like probably $400, which is a lot. Like today would cost you a tenth of that, right? Depending on where you buy it. It's still expensive, but not as expensive as it used to be. So what happened now is precisely with all the craze of Ozempic, which started 3-4 years ago, probably 5, it started to be normal for people to speak about this. And when, of course, you start to speak about something, you normalize it. And then, of course, you see results and it's easier to acquire. Like you get insurance for it. You can buy it in any pharmacy nowadays. You have, like a prescription in many cases. People start to lose fear, and then it opens the door to many others. But again, the most commonly ones, the ones that opened the floodgate were basically all the GLPs that are related to fat loss.
So why don't we talk about fat loss for a minute, since this seems to be where a lot of the attention is.
Mhm.
So where do GLP-1s really fit into all of this? And I know for me personally, I have been microdosing tirzepatide in small amounts, which seems to be helping for my appetite, but I would just love to learn more.
So basically, to upon what these peptides do, they work on different mechanisms. It's not just one, right? But generally speaking, what they would do is they first slow gastric emptying. So basically, you feel fuller for a longer time. The other would be they actually do reduce your appetite via signaling your nervous system. They also improve your satiety hormones. And along with that, they also stabilize blood sugars, which are the main components on why a lot of people overeat, right? You eat something that raises blood sugar, that gives you the indication that you should probably eat more. Like in many cases of people that have a dysregulated metabolism. Of course, food is very yummy, so that also creates dopamine hit, so you actually want to eat more of it. A lot of food is already pre-processed or semi-processed or highly processed, so the digestion speed is also faster. So you're able to eat more, it has more calories, etc., 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 right? Contrary to, I don't know if you knew this, but there are actually some diets that actually you mimic a little bit, of course, not to the extent, because I'm going to be corrected and probably there are a lot of people are going to be sending a lot of messages that I'm factually incorrect. A lot of the mechanisms, like I was saying, that peptides do, you already have them in your body. So the mechanisms for natural satiety, you can actually induce them with whole foods. And like, for example, the protocol that I prescribe to my patients, because I'm also a nutritionist, is basically a whole food, high protein, nutrient dense diet, which is sort of what we should be eating to a point that actually maintains or increases natural GLP production, because you are satiated for long. The food that you eat is, of course, yummy, but not as yummy or not as delicious as processed food, right? Processed food is actually engineered for you to actually want to eat much more. And it uses all these different sensations that real food wouldn't actually have in nature. It's combining flavors that doesn't exist in nature, different tastes, different textures and stuff like that basically create this mental orgasm of food to a point. And of course, they raise very rapidly and for a longer time your blood sugar. That actually makes you store many of those calories more rapidly. And in many cases, give you more hunger. So if you actually eat in a certain way, you can actually mimic some of the benefits of Ozempic to a point, but of course, not at the same extent, right? Let's say that not all food will give you this, whereas using a peptide will give you this. This is why it's so potent, especially for people that have food addiction or have a dysregulated metabolism or are driven by all this, what is called food noise, that you cannot stop thinking about food. And with every, like, just a little bit of stress, you already created this coping mechanism that is related to craving food. And the first thing you do without even noticing is go and grab a granola bar or a donut or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think for me personally, it definitely helps with the food noise, because I think what's important is maintaining a healthy diet, working out. You can't replace strength workouts, and I think they're so important, especially for longevity. But using these peptides in a safe way as a sort of a supplement or something to help build on something that you're already working on, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. And to actually answer your question, because I debated a bit, what would be the benefit and would be the best person to probably use any of these weight loss peptides is generally speaking, I see them prescribed to anybody that has a weight issue. And that's okay. That will actually help. But the best benefits will be for people, okay, that you have a weight issue, but you're willing to actually make the changes and are using this as a stepping stone to change your habits, right? Because it's going to help you immensely to reduce this food noise and cravings and many of the things that actually make dieting hard. Many people start a diet and they fail. And that's the classic. You lose 2 pounds and then you gain 3. You lose another 2 and then you gain 3 more. And this is likely because, of course, you probably don't have the correct information. You are doing crash diets. You are jumping from one diet to the other, or you think that, okay, you do that hard for a week, then you have a cheat meal, right? You deserve it. That's many of the common topics. And I'm just saying this because I've been coaching people for over 20 years for fat loss. And that's like the most common trope that I see. People just have limited willpower, and we live in obesogenic environment where everything is rigged against us. You have to actually be a rebel in many cases, or the black sheep of the family, or go against society to be able to basically have success in many of these dieting protocols. All your family is going to be against you. They are not into weight loss, right? Or if they are already thin and you're the one that has a weight problem and they eat whatever, they're going to even try to sabotage you willingly or even without noticing. And again, you go out with friends or you have this work environment in the office, everybody's eating whatever, and you want to be the one eating grilled chicken and asparagus, right? So again, everything is rigged. So unless you really have this type of personality where you don't care, which is something that very few people have, and you have a lot of willpower, it's going to be very difficult for you to actually be able to sustain an actual deficit or understand what you have to do, because again, results are very slow. And so what happens with these peptides is, and how I say it is, it's like swimming. You still have to swim, but swimming against the current, which is the norm for many people. So you get tired eventually and you just quit, or swimming where the current is actually pushing you. It's totally different. Okay, you're swimming, but it feels effortless to a point, which in the end, it has, I wouldn't say connotation, but it gives you a false sense of security, which happens to many people as well, because not everything is sugar, like with these peptides. In the end, at the beginning, people try them and they say, well, I'm not hungry. It's the first time that, I have these, I don't know, you put a burger in front of a person that loves them. He probably takes 2 bites and then he says, I'm full, and it doesn't feel as appetizing as before, because that's what happens actually, right? A lot of people have never experienced this sense of fullness and not having the hunger or the craving to continue eating. It basically kills a lot of those dopamine receptors or sense of pleasure that you get from food, right? Which has another interesting side effect, which remind me to talk about later, because it can also, there are new peptides now derived from GLP that also help with addiction, alcoholism, smoking, and many other things, right? Because they discover that they make a lot of the things we like and we love to do not be as likable. But again, coming to this negative side effect of what these GLPs can do is because everything feels so effortless, many people stop eating the correct foods they should eat. They think, okay, so I can probably still have a burger. I can probably still eat pizza. I could probably still eat the donut and it won't have the negative side effects that it used to have. And so what happens is, okay, yeah, they probably eat less of it, but at the expense of eating the correct foods they should be eating. And so this is what brings many of the negative aspects that we've seen in the news or in many sensationalist magazines and stuff that GLPs do. They are a tool, but they do have consequences if you don't use them correctly. And the many negatives, for example, are muscle loss, loss of bone density, loss of actual organ tissue, because your body is to a point is consuming itself, because in the end what they do is they make you eat less, and in the end you consume less calories, and calories still matter, but what also matters is where those calories come from, right? Like I was mentioning, proteins are the building block of your body. If you don't eat sufficient protein, what's your body going to do? Protein is not just for muscle. Every single cell of our body is made up of proteins, right? Your hair, your eyes, your organs, your skin, your bones, your hormones, enzymes, everything. So the body has a minimal requirement and cell turnover that has to make every day. And muscle basically is the least important of them to a point. So this is why you get the Ozempic phase, people that lose a lot of weight and they look scrawny. And of course, you start to see also the loss of bone density, osteoporosis, osteopenia, in many cases of people that have been using them for a while, especially more common in women, but now you see cases on men. And this is happening because people are eating much less protein than they should be eating. People are already eating very little protein to what they should be eating. And now with this, they're going to be eating half of it. People drink much less. And that also causes a lot of electrolyte imbalances. And when you don't have enough electrolytes, I don't know if you knew this. It's not very, I think that a lot of people know, but minerals are stored in our bones, right? So when your body doesn't have enough sodium, for example, or enough potassium to a point, it goes back to your bones and leaches it out because that's where it's stored, right? Because it has to maintain a certain balance for all your cells to function correctly, especially again with iron. That is more known. For example, women, okay, you have your period, you're going to bleed. If you don't eat sufficient iron or you don't recover, eventually this is one of the reasons why women develop osteoporosis in bigger amounts than men, right? Because, well, men don't suffer or don't go through their period and they don't lose the iron. But again, it's just not iron. Any mineral that you don't consume in proper amounts, eventually your body may get it from your bones.
Gosh, it's you hear about that commonly about people that lose a lot of weight and then they don't maintain a proper diet, especially like you said, not getting enough protein, which can result in losing muscle and not fat. And the idea is that we want to lose fat. So
exactly, and because people don't know how to distinguish between losing fat and losing muscle, a lot of people just weigh themselves, right? So if you see, okay, 2 pounds lost, 5 pounds lost, okay, they're going in the right direction. But how do you actually determine or has you're losing actual fat or also fat and muscle, right? And in many studies, especially the first ones with GLPs, when people did an uncontrolled diet, you see that in many cases, half of the weight loss is basically lean tissue, right? And then, of course, lean tissue is not just muscle. You also have water, glycogen, which basically fill up the muscle. And every time you do a drastic diet, you're going to lose a little bit of that, which can be recovered. It's basically, again, a non-issue. But a big chunk, a big percentage of what you actually lose if you don't eat sufficient protein and also do strength training is actually going to be contractile tissue, the actual muscle. And muscle is very hard to acquire, especially after a certain age, right? So a big thing that's happening with people that don't do any of these protocols properly. And when I say properly, I usually, for example, I do prescribe certain peptides in Mexico. My wife is a plastic surgeon and we have a clinic and we are using some of them for aesthetic reasons and of course for weight loss. But we don't sell any peptide without an actual prescription and a natural dieting protocol that the patient has to sign that they're willing to do. Because we don't want to put them in the spot where, okay, you lose 20 pounds, but 12 of them are actual muscle. And most people are not going to be using peptides forever. I hope they wouldn't, right? And what happens is when you stop using them, of course, the hunger bounces back and you gain many of that weight that you lost. But imagine that you lost 20 pounds and now you gain 25, but basically of pure fat because your metabolism does go down when you lose muscle, right? In this case, well, just to clarify, your metabolism will always slow down a bit every time you lose weight, regardless of where that weight comes from. This is a very important topic because people think, oh, I used to eat 2,000 calories and I was 40% body fat. And now I'm 20% body fat and I get fatter at, 1,800, right? My metabolism slowed down. Not necessarily because the less you weight, the less your body has to carry to a point. It's like if we're talking about a loaded truck versus an unloaded truck, right? The unloaded truck will require less gasoline or less power. It doesn't mean that its power or its motor is working less. It doesn't mean that it went kaput. It's just that it requires less power because it has less weight to carry. That's one thing. But the other is if you actually do lose muscle, your metabolism does slow down. And this is something that's happening a lot with people that do these peptides irresponsibly or without knowing what they need to do. And of course, then they have this big rebound where they regain all the weight back, but not the muscle weight, the actual fat weight. So they end up much fatter and
Oh
with a
God.
slower metabolism to boot. So that's a worst case scenario.
So if for someone who's already doing the work, they're active, they're eating well, but they feel stuck, would peptides actually make a difference in that case?
I'd say that's the best case scenario. People that are actually already doing something very good and they just want to probably take it to the next step. It's again the example of what I was saying of swimming against the current or with the current that's pushing you. You're already doing the work. You know what you have to do, but there's a point that, for example, going back to my wife's plastic surgeon clinic, right? There are people that do everything perfectly. That you diet down, you eat perfectly all your macros, your calories, you train like an Olympic athlete, but there's just this little bit of fat that's not going to move around. And that usually comes either because of genetics or because how your body is built, because your age, and there's really nothing to do about it. But okay, plastic surgery, you go and then that's where you have, for example, focal liposuction, right? Or a sculpt, like the one they use currently, which is more like to sculpt rather than just take the fat away, and they just take probably that little bit of love handle that you had. You already are 12%, 10% body fat, but it's just this cosmetic thing, or you have a little bit of loose skin that no matter how you diet, you're not going to be able to take it up. In a sense, GLPs to help you get over that hurdle, right? They won't also take away that loose skin, but it will make it look much better. And the same effort that you're doing right now, it's going to be probably effortless, right? So the same effort you put to probably get to 12% body fat, now without noticing, you can get to 10%.
Yeah. So it can make sense in that with respect to GLPs. And let's talk about peptides. I know there's peptides out there. I'm hearing more about them for skin health, for example.
Mm-hmm.
How are those being used?
So those are the ones that I mostly recommend, that I use myself, and that I'm more super excited about, because here's some real life examples. For example, my wife again. You look at her, she's a plastic surgeon, very successful. She's done probably any procedure that you know of, because again, she has to look the part. And she started using the famous glow stack, which I'll explain a little bit later what it is. What is a cosmetic combination of certain peptides that make you look much better. And we started using them in December. No, late December, probably January, and it has been a while. Like, it had been a while since someone has actually stopped her and told her, "Hey, you look different. You look great. What are you doing? Right? What procedure are you actually doing?" And the only thing that she was doing at the time was taking basically the glow stack. And then in my own case, it's exactly the same. I've been going to the gym, and people that I've been going to the same gym for years are like, "What do you do in your face?" And it's not something common for a man to say to another man, you know? Like, we never tell anything like that. It's like, "Hey, you did something." It's like, no, it's like, yeah, it's just this peptide. It makes you sort of glow, or it makes your skin look much better, right? So this actual combination of peptides is called glow, precisely because it sort of makes your skin glow. And it's a combination of three peptides that are called BPC 157, which is a peptide used mostly for healing and reducing inflammation, which is a peptide that our body produces itself. Basically, was found or discovered in the gastric tract. Basically, what makes our stomach heal itself, because we know the stomach is filled with acid, and is one of the most hostile parts of our body. To put it in perspective, right? Everything you put in, it will be eventually digested. So imagine, how does the actual inner part of the stomach lining, heals itself or is protected from our own stomach acid? And it was found that it's basically because of this peptide, BPC 157, that basically makes your body heal itself. And of course, it's not magic, but it does make you heal exponentially more quickly than if you were not taking it. And that's one of the combinations that is used in this stack. So it's BPC 157, then it's copper peptide, GHK-CU, which probably a lot of people have heard because it's also used in many cosmetic creams right now. It's one that it's blue, and you now see it in many products on Amazon, which many of them are bunk. They just color the product blue. But it actually, what it does, it makes your own body produce more collagen in more amounts. Like when we are young, we produce sufficient collagen, and as we get older, our body produces less of it. And it's one of the reasons, among many others, why our skin starts to lose elasticity, it loses its shine, we start to get wrinkles, and it loses moisture, blah, 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 right? Because we start to produce less of these proteins to a point. So it makes your body remember again or induce the production of natural collagen better or in better amounts. And so then we have the last one, which is TB500, which also improves healing acceleration, wound healing. Again, very similar to BPC, but it actually acts as a complementary mechanism to BPC 157. One improves healing and reduces inflammation, and the other one increases cell migration and healing acceleration. So they complement each other. So the effect of these three peptides in your skin is almost magical, but it also works very well for reduced systemic inflammation. So, for example, athletes and many people that may have high CRP, systemic inflammation in their body, which is a marker that you can review via a blood test, it can help you mitigate that, right? And of course, it's not magic. It should be taken along with taking the steps in the right direction, right? Like probably, okay, what's actually causing the inflammation? Probably you're eating certain foods that are not ideal for you. Probably you're doing certain things that are increasing certain hormones like cortisol, etc., and you're in this environment where you have them high all the time and it's causing inflammation. Okay, let's work on reducing or stopping the cause of the malady while we use this to help this manage or mitigate, right?
Yeah, makes sense. So when you're talking about BPC 157, is that the same peptide that's used to aid in recovery?
Yeah, the one you probably you've heard as the Wolverine peptide, it's BPC or the combination of BPC plus TB500. Those two are usually used together, or in many cases just BPC. BPC, you can actually take it as a pill. There are some studies that say that it helps more for systemic inflammation and more for everything that's related to gut health, because it's the only peptide right now that can actually, well, there are a few others, but let's say that it's the only one that can actually bypass the stomach tract and the stomach acid. And of course, it has to be a special type of preparation. It's not just any kind. But that's the most common one. And you can also inject it it's recommended to usually inject it near the place where you have an issue. Let's say that you have tendonitis, right? In your elbow. Okay. Ideally, you would want to inject it the closest to the area that you want to treat, right? Or you have an issue, believe it or not, and I've seen, like in my case, of course, but many patient cases, a friend that actually had an issue on the Achilles tendon, and she had been fighting with that with a slow recovery for 6 months, and it was like, geez, you need to take this, just try it, I'll even buy it for you. And she was like very against it because she didn't want to inject. She thought it was steroid or something weird. And then she, after 6 months of not getting any progress, she goes and takes it. And within 2 weeks, she was walking again. It's like, I told you, Bob, I told you, right? It's like, worst case scenario, nothing happens. Best case scenario, you recover faster. So you have really nothing to lose, right?
What about peptides that support like strength and muscle tone? Would you recommend for that? Or are there a specific stack that would be good for that?
So that's a big misconception. And I wouldn't say that there are yet any peptides for muscle building. That's a big misconception. A lot of people think that growth hormone related peptides are going to help with muscle building. And the reality is that there are none so far. Like there are a few that are being studied and are going to be probably released within the next years, if not next year. But as in the sense of actually building muscle, they don't. The confusion comes from the name growth hormone. And then a lot of clinics and a lot of influencers, they do sell into that story. But growth hormone in humans and in usually physiological amounts, what it does is basically moves energy or takes energy from your cells or allows you to use more energy. So basically, you probably have heard that, or the audience has heard this idea that when you fast and you train fasted, you increase growth hormone, right? So a lot of people think, oh, if I train fasted, I'm going to build more muscle. The actual reality is that growth hormones in adults, in physiological amounts, meaning the amounts you segregate or secrete naturally from any stimuli, basically what they do is they tell your body to basically use all the energy that it has stored. So you would lose more fat by using growth hormone when you train fasted to a point versus if you didn't train fast, but to a point. And especially growth hormone, like in the cases of peptide, like talking about CJC or tesamorelin or many others, what they actually do is they help you in many cases target directly um, what would be organ body fat, right? The fat that is basically stuck to your organs, the one that is actually more damaging. Instead of just targeting general body fat or subcutaneous body fat, they would target visceral body fat. So mostly what they will help is people that have, let's say, fatty liver, allow you to take that fat away from your liver, right? So it should be taken along in many cases with a GLP in case that you are over fat, right? Or they do help a little bit with recovery. But in the sense of actual muscle building, so far there are no peptides that actually do that. And you should just, if you actually want to go the enhanced route, just go with classic steroids. They're going to be cheaper and going to give you the actual benefit that you want instead of just playing with a peptide that is going to be much more expensive and it's not going to really give you any visible benefit in the sense of muscle building. And I know that some people have said, oh, but I gain. The effect is not really as important versus what you would get if doing the other stuff. Or in many cases, it's a placebo because, okay, you're doing the training, you're eating better, etc., and taking this, the effect is minimal. But again, I'm not saying that they don't exist. Next year, they're going to release some of them. And I don't recall the name exactly, but they are called something with Green Gold or something, which are also being studied by Pfizer and Eli Lilly, and they're going to be thrown up along with the next round of GLP. So you will not only target fat loss, but also muscle maintenance, which is the issue we're talking about. If you don't use them properly, you have the risk of losing muscle. Well, the next generation will allow you to actually maintain muscle, or in some cases even build it without even trying.
Question for you. So if someone decides to start taking peptides, like how are they normally taken? Are they injected? Are they taken orally? What does that look like?
That's the biggest drawback. Why a lot of people are like, at first they are very willing to take them, and then when they understand the actually delivery mechanism, they step back. Right now, most of them you have to inject them yourself, so it has a little bit of a high entry point in the sense that the most common ones, the GLP ones, you can acquire them with a prescription in a pharmacy, with your doctor, in a clinic. And most of them come in a pre-filled pen, right? And it's those pens like you've seen with the Ozempic ones where you have the pre-filled amount of the prescription. It has a very small needle that you inject in any subcutaneous tissue, probably, I don't know, your stomach or your butt or whatever, right? The most experimental ones and the ones that are probably more interesting, you actually have to buy a vial of a lyophilized powder that you have to reconstitute yourself with bacteriostatic water, or the clinic may do that for you. And you have to keep them in cold temperature, basically the fridge. You have to learn to manage them properly to avoid any kind of damaging of the peptide because they are very fragile. Like if they change temperature, there's the idea that they can lose potency, and of course you have to be very clean and disinfect them, etc. Right? So it has a little bit of a learning curve that a lot of people are afraid to get into, and of course understand about dosaging and how much you're going to inject and the timing, because it has. You do seem to, when you start with doing all of these things, you sort of look like Frank White from Breaking Bad, right? Or probably like a drug addict, because you have your stack of needles and you have some weird vials on the
That's a good word.
refrigerator, right? So unless you are someone that comes from a medical um, background, right? Or your family sort of understand this, they're probably gonna go, this is weird, right? But again, it's not impossible. It just takes a little bit of reading and understanding and a little bit of math. And now there are even apps that allow you to understand or that do all of these calculations for you. But still, there, as everything, there have been cases that probably you've seen on the news or on Reddit or X or Twitter or whatever, of people that have used the incorrect amount of a certain peptide or haven't gotten a reaction to a certain peptide and they end up in ER or in a hospital, right? These are overblown to my experience and my knowledge. Like there are more people that die out of a car crash or whatever, right? But again, there are cases that are right now in fashion because that's the thing to talk about, right? But again, this is why you have to tread with caution. Don't use something that you don't understand, and preferably go with a professional that actually describes it to you or prescribes it to you and explains it, how you're going to use it, when you're going to use it, and of course that you actually need it. Because in many cases, I see two sides of the story. People that have access to them and just want everything without understanding the implications, or people that don't have very high ethics and like either a compounding pharmacy or a clinic, and they just basically, you go with a certain symptom or you want something and they sell you the whole pharmacy, right? And I've seen here in Mexico, basically tell some of my patients that most of the time that I spent fixing prescriptions that other doctors did, right? They basically told them 20 different things and they just needed one, or they didn't need anything.
So that brings up a good question. If someone is curious, but still a little cautious, which sounds like they should be, where should they start?
That's a great question. Again, it really depends on what the person wants to achieve. Generally speaking, what I would say is I'd go to a clinic or a well-trusted health clinic that has good ratings and that has a good level of ethics, commitment, etc. That a lot of people trust, and of course that has good results. And there are many in the States, in Miami, that I know of, right? Or go to a health professional that actually prescribes them, that is not against them. Because right now you see many doctors that are against them because they say, oh, it doesn't have an FDA approval, it doesn't have studies, blah, blah, blah. And the reality is in between two sides. Just because it doesn't have FDA approval doesn't mean that it's going to be harmful for you, right? There are many reasons why it doesn't have the FDA approval. In many cases, it's because there's no economic interest behind it. For example, PPC. There's the reason why likely, and again, don't quote me on this, doesn't have a FDA approval is because it can put a lot of medications that are on their payroll to people just not wanting to use it anymore because it really is that magical to a point. And again, I'm not trying to exaggerate, but in many cases, it heals people or it takes pain away, and then they don't have to use a very expensive medication. But where do people should start? Again, it really depends. If they just want to start to use something, the most easy thing is go with a doctor that is well-versed and that has knowledge on this. Now there are certifications on the topic and more doctors are open and willing to learn about this. The other would be self-learning. If you go down the rabbit hole, for example, on Twitter and X, and you start to search about peptides, not on TikTok, please. TikTok is, like 9 out of 10 times the information you're going to get on TikTok is just, and again, just to put an example, you have teenagers talking about peptides or teenagers talking about wealth and things like that. It's like, I wouldn't trust someone that doesn't have the mileage to tell me about a certain topic, right? So you have a teenager talking about peptides, like, dude, like what you learn, you probably learn it in Wikipedia and stuff like that. What's your experience, right? Your actual mileage. Just as my wife, plastic surgeon, had like 18 years, she had to study, at least in Mexico, you have to study almost 8 years. Like, the residency, the actual practice, then 2 extra years for that. So you end up studying for more than 8 years. And then the extra studies that you do, she probably has like 12 years in study. She has done over almost 1,000 procedures. So imagine all the experience that she has. And then you have someone that has 18 years telling you about something. Just be wary. That's what I'm trying to say, right? But again, now there are certifications. You can actually study a lot of these things because we're in the tipping point where you cannot shut the floodgates. So there are places where you can learn about them from people that they're not a doctor, but they are very intelligent people that are actually very passionate about all of this. And believe me or not, even though that I've taken certifications on peptides, where I've learned the most are on what people are actually doing with their body and experimenting. Because now we have this repository, which is called the Internet, of people and forums of people that are doing these experiments every day on themselves. So you learn a lot of what to do and what not to do, especially, right? So it's not all of these people that are guinea pigs and, oh, I did this and I overdosed on this and now my skin turned blue. Okay, let's not do this, right? Because they sort of become cases.
Blue is
and I
not a
know
good look.
it's not a good look, but what I'm trying to explain here is that a lot when you look at the pyramid of evidence and when you look at studies and how actual scientific studies are done, you don't discard anecdotes, right? And especially when, okay, it's an N1, just one thing that happened. But when you have that multiplied by 1,000 or 10,000, even though it may not be a natural scientific study, it tells you that there's some plausibility on certain things, right? And again, these are not bots, these are not trolls. You can verify to a point that there are real people that are posting this because they're posting every day and you start to trust or get to know who's full of shit or who's actually telling certain things. And so you sort of create to a point this, again, circle of trust of people that are actually writing protocols that may not be very in line with what an actual article says, but you see what the actual effects are. Just to give you an example, with talking about GLPs again, despite all the studies and the trials that Eli Lilly and Pfizer have done, there were many undocumented side effects that are now documented that were found by the users. And now they actually put them in the little, in the fine print and are now accepted. So why? Because you cannot deny what the actual people are doing. And again, what I'm trying to explain here is going back to your question. If there's for people that really want to learn, okay, there's the studies, there are the doctors, but also don't discard. I would say, like, it's not the dark internet, it's not the dark web. It's just very open, but just need to go to certain forums and start asking the right questions or get to do a little bit of a deep dive on certain topics.
I have to say, Luis, honestly, one of the things that concerns me the most is sourcing. Like I feel like most people have no idea where these compounds are actually coming from.
Mm-hmm.
How big of an issue is that right now?
Here's the reality, and you cannot hide it. 99% of probably all the peptides that you're going to see or that you're going to obtain, even if you buy them in the States, outside of an actual compounding pharmacy, come from China. And in many cases, a lot of people may be a little bit afraid, oh, it's come from China, I don't want it. But there has been just as I was speaking about the experience and anecdotes, basically, I'd say over 80-90% of people that buy peptides in the States right now, because of cost, because of obtaining peptides that are not yet available, they buy them direct from China in a gray market. And let's understand that gray market doesn't mean that it's prohibited. It just means that it's not done in the States, it's not acquired easily, but you're not doing anything illegal, right? The issue with the gray market is that to a point, people think that it doesn't meet the purity standards so that you're not getting what you actually are buying, right? Worst case, probably it's underdosed. Best case, it's underdosed. No, so worst case would be that you're getting something that's not pure. And again, you get a third eye or you get an infection or something. Or best case, you're probably getting an underdosed substance. And it's not going to actually have the effect, right? Well, there was a recent study, again, because a lot of people are buying directly from the gray market. And what they're doing is they're betting. You buy from the source and you directly by yourself, you take it to a lab and test the purity, the content of the peptide, etc. And now there's this website that you can go. It's called Janusink. And you check many of the actual vendors. the source, if they are actually selling you what they are selling, the purity, the grade, etc. And so they created this repository of vendors that are trusted, vendors that are not trusted. And I don't know if you are on X, what it was used to be Twitter, but there are many famous statistics and people that write about many of these topics that just don't talk about peptides. They talk about many topics. One of them is called Kemu. He talks a lot about statistics and politics, and now he's gotten to talk about all this peptide craze. And he just released, I guess, last week, a study that they did on the gray market peptides. And again, this is something that probably the big pharmaceutical doesn't really want you to know, but they tested a lot of the batches from selected providers from China, and they met all the FDA requirements. Right.
So you said there is actually a site where you can go and check the credibility of the company, of the suppliers of peptides,
of the company, of certain batches, even, and so on and so forth. Because what people are doing, it's a market that it's self-regulating, because there's not a natural right now, and it's going to be so. To a point, it's going to be government regulating in a few months and in a few years, right? And especially now with Kennedy opening, because he himself is using them, and many other people that they don't tell, but they are actually using them. Everybody in Hollywood, a lot of doctors, a lot of professionals, athletes, everybody and their mother are using one or other peptide right now. It's something, again, that you cannot just shut it off. So in the meantime, because the community is so big, people are actually doing the work that an agency would have done. Like, I want to keep using them. I don't buy directly from a pharmacy, either because the pharmacy is not producing what I want, or is prohibitively expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you buy it from China, just to give you an example, and it's like, just to give you an idea, like a GLP would cost you $300, a single dose or a vial. You can get the same for 10 doses if you buy direct from China. So, of course, right? And I've actually bought from China. I tested them, and basically the same. And in many cases, when you buy direct from the US from another vendor, the only thing that they're doing is just putting their label on it.
Maybe we could drop a link to that in show notes. So anybody that's looking to source on their own could start with that website to.
Yeah, just basically just to go and check if the source is legit, or if you are getting into something that could be sketchy. Again, this is for informational purpose. I want to make it very clear that we're not selling anything that's illegal, that people should do work and investigation, research, and understand the pros and cons, and that even if something is widely used and for most people it doesn't have any negative effect, like, everybody to a point has different genetics, and because these are, again, signals that align, or again, keys that will open certain locks in your body, we don't know if you may have a different genetic profile that can cause a reaction, right? Like I mentioned, I don't talk about peptides with a client that doesn't send me a complete blood panel, and I don't have an interview just to review their whole clinical story, because there are some peptides, even talking about BPC and many others that recover and etc., that we don't know if they may cause, for example, the increase of cancer cells, right? Because they increase the growth and the repair of cells. We don't know yet, even though there are some studies that say that they don't. What if you have a history or genetic predisposition to a certain cancer, and that actual peptide makes it grow, right? We don't know yet. So again, it's a thing to tread with caution. And just because you saw something on TikTok that this person is talking about this and that you can combine 20 different things and you get magical effects, doesn't mean that, first, it's actually true, and second, that it's actually going to work for you. In many cases, what you see on, at least my experience on Twitter, well, not really on Twitter. Twitter would be more informed, the same as Reddit. But my experience mostly on TikTok and also on Instagram, it's because it's people that are selling you something. They give you a coupon also, and they direct you to a source. That's usually what it does. So just be very wary. Like, I wouldn't use TikTok as a source of information, basically, for anything related to science. my experience and my advice, but rather go to X, where you actually have to read, right? And you have to go to a thread and do a little bit of more investigation, and will take you to a link where there's an actual blog or a writing about something that, again, you actually have to do reading and comprehension, which is something that most of us don't want to do in this day and age. We just want the tidbits of information and everything already bite-sized, which, okay, it gives you a little bit of an idea, but in many cases, it doesn't tell you the whole story and the benefits or the cons of everything.
And to your point, right now, the average person sees influencers talking about peptides like they're supplements. And I think it is important, like what you're mentioning, that the public fully understands that these are biologically active compounds that alter signaling pathways in our body.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's important to keep that in mind.
Totally.
So, do you think that there are clinics out there that are prescribing peptides because they're medically necessary, or do you think they've become an incredibly profit business model?
I think it's a mix of both, right? Like I mentioned, it's one of the things, the topics that I have been in recent years more excited about because of all the possibilities. And again, I remember when I was a kid, and I already sort of mentioned that I used to be overweight, and I wanted, like, if there was a pill that actually made you lose weight effortlessly, that would be magical, right? And even though there are certain things that help you to a point, they always had very bad side effects and very dangerous side effects in many cases. I don't know, you're remembering that 90s, the amphetamine craze, right? Where you had many pills that actually did make you lose a lot of weight, but at the expense of accelerating your heart rate or give you heart palpitations and many things that actually were dangerous, and some people died. And there are other that are not, more so in the gray market and black market, that, yeah, that actually increase fat loss, but yeah, a very dangerous side effects. You can actually die from using many of those, right? So these actually GLPs are, I don't know if you knew this, but the amount, how big the actual industry is, we're talking about $1 trillion. It's actually bigger
Wow.
than AI. And I was just reading a statistic yesterday that right now, 1 in 8 Americans are now using GLP drugs.
1 in 8?
1 in 8. This is as
Surprised
today.
me.
And in the next few years, it's going to be probably 1 in 4.
Wow. And how do you see FDA approval coming forth with drugs? I'm not drugs, with these peptides. Are there
I guess I see that very positive progress, especially like I was mentioning with Secretary Kennedy. He is a very big proponent of them himself. I have heard that, like everything, that he uses some of them, or he has used some of them, and many, again, people that are in positions of power. So it's when something starts to be positive and it has, again, with responsibility, a good effect, and I guess in the end, it poses a big optimization and improvement for basically the human race, which in this case I see as the next big thing. I think it's a net positive for them to be to a point regulated, and so that they can be used responsibly, but more openly used or widely used. Like, it's not something that should be kept under lock and key. Rather, the more people use it to a point, and I see it as like the healthier population that a nation has, right? The more intelligent, the more told they're stronger, the better that nation will be, right? So why not have a nation of Captain Americans, right? Versus a nation of people that are just unhealthy and sad and depressed, right?
And how do you see peptides? Let's talk about longevity, extending lifespan in the future.
Oh,
And where do you see this space going over the next, 10, 20, 30 years? And I know it's a long, long time to think about.
no, I don't think it's going to be in the next 20 years. I think in the next 5 years.
Okay.
So I was telling my wife yesterday that I was just going to be able to get a hold of a new experimental peptide that is called FOX04. With actually what it does, it kills senescent cells. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Not really, but I've heard of
But
it. But
basically, what it does is, one of the thesis of aging is that we create copies of a copy of a copy of a copy of ourselves, and these copies lose fidelity, right? So imagine that instead of having the most healthy cells in your body also has to give energy to these copies of a copy of a copy of a cell. And then your healthy cells over time start to die, and you only replicate the unhealthy cells. Again, this is one of the theories of aging. There are many theories as to why we age, but this is one of the understood ones. So imagine that you kill these senescent cells, which are then for the ones that are not really as healthy as they should be. They shouldn't be replicating. You only want the healthy ones to replicate. So there's a theory that if you kill or manage to make these cells get into apoptosis, which is they kill themselves or they die by themselves, your body starts to replicate the healthy ones. So this is a theory for longevity and aging. You stay the same. Instead of getting older, you replicate only the healthy cells. So what they found out, again, in my studies, is that using this peptide makes your bad cells or your old cells die. And so your body regenerates only the healthy cells, and you actually start to look younger. Again, this is a thesis. It's something that I read. I was about to acquire a sample of this peptide, but it's still, for whatever reason, they still cannot sell it to me. Probably by the next month, I'm going to be able to acquire some of it. So let's see if by next year start to look like Benjamin Button. It seems that it actually worked.
We will have to follow up with you and see what that looks like.
Yeah, but what we're saying about excited, I do think that, and this is not something that I'm inventing. It's I've read it from several people that are in the longevity field, that if you are able to reach your 40s right now in very good shape, looking very good with a decent amount of health, or even better, with great health, during the next 5 years, you will be able to acquire certain procedures or peptides or longevity, again, let's call them procedures, where you will be not only able to just live to 120 or 150, but actually reverse certain aspects of your aging profile. Like in this case, probably because there are two paths, right? One, when we're talking about longevity, is not just about living 120 years. Like in my case, I wouldn't love, or I don't see myself living to 120 years if I'm actually going to get older. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. I don't want to be in a wheelchair. I don't want to be, like all a hunchback and, all like a prune. That doesn't
quality of life. You want to have quality of life.
I want quality, not just longer life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's because there's a difference between longevity and lifespan. Lifespan just means living longer. You want longevity. You want vitality. You want to be able to do all the things you do right now, or even better, for longer. So right now, like what we're saying is, you're already over 40 and you manage to achieve all of these within the next 2 or 3 years. There will be peptides or many other procedures where you will be able to maintain that. And we actually see that and even reverse it. Just to give you like an example, I'm almost 49 and I just took my blood test. I take normally 2 a year, sometimes 3. I just took one on Monday, and basically everything, and this is something very stupid, but everything came out correctly, save one thing, because I was feeling a little bit tired on the last 2 weeks, and I came dehydrated. And it's like, how can I be dehydrated when I'm the salt dealer, right? I'm the one that should be super salty, but yeah, it's like, I have to remember myself to drink more electrolytes than normal.
So we're talking about electrolytes. So bringing in a bit about you, not to diverge too much from our topic, but bringing a little bit more about your company, Element, right here.
Element.
Which are fabulous. I'm actually drinking the pink lemonade right now after my workout this morning, which is fabulous. So tell me a little bit more about this electrolyte drink and how it helps to replenish the salts in our body. Because I know for this one, for example, I'm looking, there's like 1,000 milligrams of sodium, which seems like a lot of sodium, but how does that work in replenishing us when we're after a strenuous workout?
So the main reason why we basically start to feel tired throughout the day is just basically electrolyte imbalance, especially if someone that trains, right? a lot of people think, oh, electrolytes are just for people that do heavy workouts or train a lot or etc. In the end, electrolytes are basically what harness our own energy. It's a topic that is not widely known, but every single cell in our body requires sort of like a spark, to get energy in and out of our cells. And it's called the sodium potassium bond. And it's normally kept in balance. The amount of sodium and potassium we normally have in our body is very well managed. Otherwise, we would die, right? Like our heart, our whole body functions via electrical signals. And this exchange of ions between sodium and potassium to a point is what drives a lot of these electrical signaling. And again, our body does a very great job for that, but it's very funny that we actually do need to replenish this throughout the day. Otherwise, we start to feel a little bit off. And so, because of probably a lot of us lived in this day and age where we used to hear that sodium was very bad for us, that it causes kidney issues, heart issues, high blood pressure, etc. We start to be very wary of sodium and just not use it on an everyday basis. But believe it or not, a lot of the foods, especially processed foods, actually are high in sodium, right? And that, of course, many of the negatives that we hear about sodium is not just because sodium itself, but because a lot of the foods that we eat already has it, and it's the overeating of these foods that actually cause, of course, with a high amounts of sodium, the issues. But if you take sodium by itself and eating a whole food diet, it actually drives more energy production. So it drives benefits, not negatives. So to actually answer your question, what sodium and potassium do, which are the main two electrolytes, the best example that I can give you is imagine that you have your car filled with gas. It's totally, the gas gauge is totally full, but the ignition doesn't work. It just won't get you anywhere. That ignition is basically what electrolytes do. It's just like that spark that allows your body to start using all the saved energy that you have as actual fuel. So one of the reasons why a lot of people feel tired in the morning and they think they need coffee, in many cases, you don't need coffee, you just need a little bit of electrolytes. And it's basically, it's an old bodybuilding trick or health trick where you wake up in the morning and the first thing you have is a small sodium shot. Sparkling water with a little bit of lime and a pinch of sea salt or whatever salt you want to call it, Himalayan salt, whatever. You just shot it and you're going to feel like $1,000,000. And it's sort of psychological to a point, but a lot of people swear by it. And it works very much.
Luis, I feel like it works because
It works.
Some slumps in my day and literally I'll take a drink like Element, and it just gives me energy again. And I feel like oh my God, I need a cup of coffee. But you just have a little bit of energy drink, not energy, but electrolytes, and it just replenishes your system, and it works.
Because it's certainly what I was saying is the spark, right? It's like the spark plug. It allows you to use your own energy. And it's a funny thing, but this is a term that was coined by my James Murphy, my CEO in Element. She basically said it perfectly once. It's like, with caffeine, you borrow energy from the future, right? So you have to pay it back. And this is why you have the crash afterwards. With electrolytes, it allows you to harness your own stored energy. Like everybody has energy, like everybody has a little bit of fat to lose, right? So it's stored energy that for whatever reason you're not being able to use properly. So we feel dragging all day long. And then you think, oh, I need more sugar or I need more
caffeine.
a monster drink or more caffeine. And then you continue this cycle when again, you're borrowing cash from a bank that you're going to have to pay. And the only thing that's happening is your debit, right? You're going to have to pay it back eventually. On the other side, it's like, hey, I do have the money. I just needed a way to get it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's electrolytes. They just harness your own energy that you have stored. And that's basically the magic behind it. And because I guess it seems like magic because it's something that we used to know, but for whatever reason, just like many other dietary advice that we used to think it was bad, and then we found out that it wasn't. Like, for example, egg yolks, right? Oh, you should only have the egg whites, blah, blah, blah. And then you find out, oh, no, the cholesterol from eggs doesn't really increase serum cholesterol and it's actually super healthy because this and that. Okay, it takes a while for science to turn around. And in this case, electrolytes are very much in this space right now.
Yeah, and it truly does work. And I can tell you, after a heavy strength workout, if I come back and I take Element, it really helps me not feel that tiredness the rest of the day. I feel like I'm even all day. Where in the past, I found that sometimes I'd do a strength based workout that was really difficult, and then I was just out of energy for the rest of the day. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm done. My body's exhausted. But in fact, what was happening is I was not getting enough electrolytes into my system. So it really does work.
Exactly.
So one more question I had, because I know we've been on the topic of peptides for quite a while, but I wanted to talk to you about peptides and sleep and what's the protocol for that? Because I know a lot of us at our age, my age, we struggle with sleep. And I am I'm understanding that there are peptides coming out to help with that, to help
Hmm.
us with sleep. And if you could give us a little education on that, that would be great.
Yeah, and believe it or not, the most known peptide for sleep is actually FDA approved. So it's called DSIP, it's Deep Sleep Inducing Peptide. And yeah, what it actually does, and you can get it basically in any health clinic that prescribes peptides. And if I recall correctly, it's like this is FDA approved, and it's one of those. There are like 12 peptides that are going to be open for compounding pharmacies in the next year. That's so that you could basically going to be able to get it everywhere. But right now, you can very much get it in many clinics. So what it actually does, it allows you to relax and basically induces restful sleep. But again, as I was saying, it's not just taking the peptide by itself. It's reviewing what's actually happening and what's the reason why you cannot really go to sleep in the first place, right? In many cases, it's because people don't have good, it's called sleep hygiene or a sleep routine. They probably have a lot of blue lighting around the house. They have a lot of noise. Their room temperature is not adequate, or they are going through a lot of stress and they don't know how to unwind properly or prepare themselves to get to sleep. And probably they have intrusive thoughts. Like again, there are many reasons you have to go and study that person to see what's actually driving the not being able to go to sleep and help them get into the correct protocol that allows them to take care of the actual issues that are causing the damage. And then along with that, you can probably see if that person is a candidate for using that DSIP, right? Because not everybody may benefit from it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was a certain peptide stack or one particular peptide that you could take that would aid in sleep.
Yeah, like the most common one would be DSIP, DSIP. Then there's others that, if we're talking about anxiety, for example, I've seen some doctors or practitioners that even prescribe oxytocin in this case
Uh-huh.
because it also allows you to relax. There's also two Russian peptides that I guess they are also FDA prescribed. These are the ones that I've also used about 10 years ago that are called Selank and Semax that allow you to reduce anxiety. So again, it really depends on what's the cause of your restlessness, right? If you're someone that's very prone to anxiety, maybe it's not DC that you need. Maybe it's taking these anti-anxiety peptides during the day so that when you hit nighttime, you're already relaxed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a complex thing. And like you said, mentioned before, there's many different reasons we aren't sleeping. I've found for me personally, it was hormonal. So getting
Exactly.
those,
You have to take that.
yeah. So it's like taking that into account as well.
And
Um,
just to give you a final example of this, like some peptides in paper and in some shared experiences, they do certain things. But once you actually try them yourself, you feel something very different. Just to give you an actual example, I've used tesamorelin, which is a growth hormone, and it supposedly allows you to, okay, get many of the benefits we were talking about, improving recovery, improving maybe a little bit of intravisceral fat loss, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the few times that I've actually used it, it gave me horrible sleep, gave me horrible anxiety, heart palpitations. I couldn't basically go to sleep, right? And I actually went down the rabbit hole, and there's a known side effect basically that some people just their genetics may not work very well for this kind of peptide, and it gives you the contrary effects of what you're actually looking for, right? And of course, there are ways for you to start to mitigate and taper around so that you can actually eventually use it, but maybe you actually don't need it.
Yeah, we don't know.
Exactly.
So in summary, I guess if there is like one thing you could say one thing to somebody before they ever start peptides, final question for you, what would it be?
It's the same thing that I usually tell people regarding supplements, which is just don't take anything blindly, but understand the whys, the hows, and the whens. Meaning, do you actually need it? Do you understand what this peptide is for? Because, and it's a question that I usually ask all my clients. Okay, I want to use this. Tell me in your own words what it is for. If you cannot describe to me the effect or what it is for, maybe you're not a candidate for that. Because it means that you're probably heard it on TikTok and you're just going with the flow, and you are basically overhyped by something that probably doesn't have evidence, or you think it's going to do something magical where it's not going to do that, right? So understand what this thing is, how it actually is administered, and if you actually need it. I have this friend that's super anxious, and she basically is like, I want to take them all. Like, no, it's like, you take this one and it makes you grow, but then you take the other one and makes you small. Like, there are certain ones that you can take 20 of them. And then if you take 20 of them, how are you actually
even know
know
what's working, what's not?
What's working and what's not? Exactly. Right. So I usually recommend, okay, there's the stack, the glow, which is already 3 of them. Okay. That's something that may be useful for probably 90% of the population, but maybe not everyone. And then let's try maybe another one. What's the most important thing for you right now? Oh, sleep. Then, okay, let's try this. Right. But with taking all the actual work that you have to do to be able to sleep better. It doesn't mean that you're going to continue with your life as like you are doing right now and then just take this. No, it's not about taking a pill or taking, a Band-Aid. You have to fix, like, what are you doing to get those cuts? Stop cutting yourself, and then we use the Band-Aid, right? Not the other way around. And the same is like, okay, maybe for fat loss, I had many consultations this week alone where people didn't require a GLP. They wanted a GLP, but it's like, you don't require a GLP. What you need first is learn to eat properly, because what the GLP does in many cases is reduces food noise and allows you to eat better. But if you're looking at it as to be able to eat whatever, it's not going to work. There are some cases where if I have an extremely obese person that has a lot of weight to lose, and I know they're going through that by themselves, they're not going to be able to lose weight. Okay, you are a perfect candidate. Let's use this. And at the same time, I'll teach you how to eat better. But if you're already that maybe has 5 pounds to lose, 10 pounds to lose, and you don't have the habits, let's first work on the habits, because otherwise likely it's going to do you more harm than good, because you're just going to get lazy and you're going to become dependent on the peptide instead of trying to do the work. I don't know if I explain myself, but there are people that don't want to use them, but they're perfect candidates. And there are people that just want to use them because they don't want to do the work. Maybe in this case, you have to do a little bit of work first, and then we can use this to basically allow you to get to the next level.
Yes. Well, Luis, thank you. This was such a good conversation. I think what really stands out to me is that peptides can be powerful, but they're only one piece of a much bigger picture. And at the end of the day, it still comes back to how we're living our everyday lives and how we exercise, how we eat, and how we are able to manage our stress, and how we take care of ourselves overall. And I really appreciate how you brought clarity to something that can feel very overwhelming. And honestly, it is very confusing right now. And for anyone listening, this isn't about chasing the next trend. It's really about understanding what truly supports your body in a sustainable and very informed way. And I hope that this podcast brought that to you, and you can take that with you when you're on your health and wellness journey, and when you leave the studio. And stop by the front desk and we will have some samples of LMNT. So if you want to try one out post workout, you can experience it for yourself. And Luis, thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time on Embodied.
Thank you, Kathy. And again, I guess the final comment that I want to make is peptides are here to stay, and I guess they're going to really help a lot of people. Like again,
Mhm.
it is a thing to be excited about, but just be a little bit wary, right? Get the right stuff, get the correct dosage, get the things that are prescribed right now from, like, even though I talked about gray market, again, I do want to make it very on point that not everybody should go to the gray markets. Like, you have to know, right? So right now, the best thing to do is just go to a clinic that sells them, that shows you the certificate of authenticity, the certificate of purity, because you don't want to play with something that you don't understand. Then if you are actually going to do a little bit of self research and investigation, you can start to go into the deep web and do that kind of research. It always pays out, right?
Mhm. I agree. Knowledge is power.
Totally.
Well, thanks, Luis. It's been great.